Gotta be something good on here. Yep. Good show. Full of heart.
Who cares what I think?
Moonjumper here with an After Earth Day special edition of Who Cares What I Think. Suffice to say, the environmental movement wants a truly noble endeavor to preserve the natural life-sustaining beauty of our God-given planet, our forest, our lakes, the desire and necessity to have clean air and water, to protect endangered species. A movement going back to the days of Teddy Roosevelt and even prior, had sadly in recent decades been completely hijacked by grifters and ideologues whose ideologies have little or nothing to do with protecting the environment and everything to do with achieving absolute power and control. So today I'd like to look at a classic film from 50 years ago, a time when true environmental activism still actually meant something and accomplished something other than weakening the U.S. to deliberately prop up dictators who are not only enemies of Western civilization, they are also the greatest, dirtiest polluters on the planet. Happy Earth Day. That movie is the 1972 science fiction classic from Universal Pictures' Silent Running, starring Academy Award nominee Bruce Durn, playing a socially awkward astronaut who takes his botanical obsessions to chilling, sociopathic extremes. Mild spoilers ahead. And to that end, I am going to read for you in real time, I'm going to put it right up on the screen, one of my pre-existing reviews of the remastered HD Blu-ray edition of the classic film, which you can find posted on Amazon.com, not a sponsor of this video, which means it's once again time for
Moonjumper's Amazon Reviews.
Thank you very much. Here we are on the Amazon website. By the way, forgive the crappy audio. I switched over to the Windows 10 built-in game capture function, and I'm using its internal mic capture, which is god-awful. Sorry about that. It just makes it so much easier to record this all in real time. I don't have to worry about syncing sound with picture. Yeah, I could take the extra time, but it's not like I'm getting paid, and it's free for you. So here we go. Crappy sound and all. Okay, so here we go. My review is listed as the very top review for this film. Gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which is, that for me that's pretty good ratings. I mean, that's a good solid, B plus, A minus thereabouts. And the title I put was a visual masterpiece that's surprisingly not boring. All right, so let's. And by the way, 106 people found this review helpful. 106. Not too bad. All right, so let's open this up. And I quote, "This movie was completed a year before I was born. It began production in 1969 and finished shooting in 1970. And it does try to capitalize on the whole flower child sentiment, accentuated by Joan Baez screeching through some terrible songs with over-the-top vibrato that's slightly off-key in far too many places to produce a lovely artsy soundtrack that sounds akin to nails on a chalkboard. And today, in an era when the radical left has so completely hijacked a once noble environmental movement for their own ulterior motives, i.e. it's more about putting government in charge of every aspect of our lives and putting them in charge of that government than anything actually having to do with preserving the environment. These self-appointed elites want to flight shame you into remaining as non-mobile as possible, easier to control you that way, while they fly on their private jets on their way to the microphones to lecture you about it. Well, because they are the important people that need to be in charge of us deplorable little people, so they have no choice, you see. So yeah, it's understandable why this environmental film might seem off-putting, because in 2020, we're just sick of it. Of course, it's 2022 now, and we're still sick of it. We're sick of the lecturing, we're sick of the hypocrisy, we're sick of the lying. No rational thinking person truly believes that Earth will be uninhabitable within 12 years. So now it's only 10 years. Unless you are so young and easily brainwashed simply because you haven't been around long enough to know what the rest of us already do. That they've been saying we only have 10 years left for decades and decades and decades, and they haven't been right yet. Even this classic, rather lovely sci-fi film is guilty of that to a degree. It advocates that by the year 2000, the year this film is set, Earth will be completely devoid of all vegetation. And last I checked, as of 2020, now 2022, that hasn't happened yet. So it's perfectly understandable why this film might seem off-putting in our current political environment, and why most of us, myself included, cheered seeing Ricky Gervais tell a bunch of self-centered, jet-hopping, limousine-riding, mansion-dwelling, self-appointed Hollywood elites that they, quote, are in no position to lecture the public on anything. Thank you, Ricky Gervais. All that said, to appreciate this rather amazing film, you have to be willing to take a step back, to take a breath, and examine it from a historical, dramatic, and filmmaking perspective. Remastered for Blu-ray, this film is visually gorgeous. As I'm not quite old enough to have seen this in the theater, well, I mean, you know, I was 1 year old when it came out. I have only seen bits of this movie on an old-fashioned standard definition square 4:3 television, and it looked moderately okay. Not amazing, it was just okay. Boy, did that old square TV not do it justice. Typically, I am not someone who is that overly impressed with sensational labels of digitally remastered and full HD and now 4K Ultra HD, which to the human eye looks identical to regular 1080p HD, except for 4K TVs making all your older disc and broadcast TV look like crap. I always laugh at these sensational ads on DVDs, which are in old-fashioned standard definition. DVDs are not HD. They try to convince you how terrible the DVD you're watching looks compared to this awesome new thing we call Blu-ray that we want you to buy, which is HD. And they do this with a split screen of an image that looks awful juxtaposed with an image that looks great because it's in HD. No, it's not. It's playing on the same standard definition DVD that you're watching, that you're playing right now, and it still looks great. LOL, I said. I'm not saying that there's no perceptible difference between SD and HD. Obviously there is. But the sharpness of a picture has less to do with the sheer number of pixels than it does with utilizing the proper medium it was intended to be shown on. For example, you can watch an old TV show on DVD on your old square television, which you still have sitting upstairs, which doesn't need as many pixels to have a sharp image as your HD TV requires. And that old show looks fantastic on your old TV with a sharp, clear picture, whereas it might not look as sharp on your HD TV, which requires more pixels. Otherwise, it looks soft and blurry. That show was captured and stored on standard definition equipment, i.e. videotape, compressed for broadcast, and meant to be shown on a standard definition television. And converting or remastering it in HD might even make it look terrible, especially if it's a sci-fi show with special effects in which its visual flaws are now more exposed, whereas they looked great before on television. However, Silent Running was a theatrical film shot with movie quality lenses on 35mm film using miniatures that were crafted with far more detail than would have been required on television at the time. Its original film source was already in quote HD end quote. Every tiny detail captured on that film via light, not pixels reinterpreted on videotape, and meant to be shown on a wide format theatrical screen. Today, a 16:9 HD television displaying 1080p is the closest thing we have to recreating that theatrical medium at home. This film represents an example of when remastering a film in high definition actually matters, and old square low pixel TV simply cannot do it justice. Silent Running looks incredible on Blu-ray. On Blu-ray, its 1970 special effects absolutely hold up today. Yes, young folks, a highly detailed practical model that is well crafted, well designed, and captured with the right kind of lens and skilled lighting simply looks far more real than any CG image, because it is real. No, it's not a real spaceship, but it is a real object photographed on real film with real light. Yes, I know real may look strange to you when you are only used to seeing video game-like imagery, which conditions you to believing that fake looks real and real looks fake. Well, this movie, seen in its proper full glory, is a visual masterpiece, demonstrating what a well-crafted practical effect should actually look like. You totally buy the spacefaring greenhouse freighters as real, both exterior and interior, artificial gravity notwithstanding. The Valley Forge looks like a vessel which could actually be built in orbit with today's technology. I was also extremely impressed with how authentic the interior sets of the American Airlines space freighter Valley Forge actually were. Oh yeah, that's not a product placement at all. The American Airlines Space Freighter Valley Forge. That's because it was filmed aboard the real USS Valley Forge, a World War II aircraft carrier recently retired prior to filming. Its interiors were redressed with modern and futuristic paint, decor, and furnishings to give it an extremely authentic look. Well, for a space freighter with artificial gravity in the year 2000. And even the 70s idea of a computerized bridge doesn't look all that off base from NASA's Space Shuttle cockpit, which was designed in the 1970s and was still flying in the year 2000, the year this movie is set. So no, it does not look all that dated, other than maybe the clothing and hairstyles, but even those are generic enough to be passable. The little droids are adorable and also come off as sufficiently plausible. This film, beautifully modeled, beautifully set-decked, and beautifully photographed, is gorgeous to behold on Blu-ray. Absolutely gorgeous. Dramatically speaking, silent running isn't nearly as preachy or boring as I was expecting it to be. The inept marketing of this film has never done it any favors, a complaint the director has in the behind-the-scenes interviews found in the special features. Pretty interesting, by the way. Universal spent almost nothing to promote it, believing that its pure visual spectacle and a new, quote, hit single, end quote, from Joan Baez, cringe, was all that was needed to bring people in by word of mouth. Didn't happen. And the promotional blurbs about it that continue to be used to this day, i.e. the blurb on the back of this very Blu-ray, would have you believe that this must be the dullest sci-fi movie ever made. Basically implying that it's 2 hours of watching a lonely guy talk to his plants and 2 droids who can't even talk back. He's just a hippie environmentalist living by himself in space, and that's it. Who would want to watch that? But that's not what this film is at all. On the contrary, this movie is a dark, disturbing, Alfred Hitchcock-style thriller. Shortened, this could have easily been an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, or The Outer Limits, or even The Twilight Zone minus any paranormal aspects. Spoilers, Bruce Durn portrays a disturbingly obsessed sociopath by the name of Freedom Lowell, who kind of gives true, well-meaning environmentalists a bad name by murdering his entire crew, who were completely innocent. I never got the sense that the filmmakers or the actor were making him out to be a hero for doing so. With wild, psychotic eyes, Lowell goes out of his way to cover up his crime and justify the unjustifiable, while the crew of another ship is busy risking their lives trying to rescue him, while he lies to them, making them believe that he and his crewmates are the victim of some tragic mishap that sent the Valley Forge off course. But no, this psycho is a calculating Hitchcockian killer with an agenda. He's kind of a Batman villain. Some of the best Batman villains are those whose motivations have kernels of nobility, but whose methods are so psychotic and destructive, Batman has to stop them. That's kind of what happens here, only instead of Batman taking him out, he actually grows remorseful enough to take himself out. While the film is sympathetic to his initial grievance, the protection of his greenhouse domes, it doesn't make him out to be anything other than a nut who needs to be brought to justice. It's actually a very engrossing and very sad tragedy. and even a cautionary tale to those who think as extremely as he does. Unfortunately, they, the woke, probably miss the whole point and see him as a hero. The movie does have its lapses in logic. I already mentioned that Earth supposedly has no vegetation left, but somehow supports a human population that sounds like a rather Star Trek-y utopia where there is no war, no disease, no unemployment, and our lefty environmental protagonist doesn't care much about that because there aren't enough trees left. He's fine with murder and mayhem as long as there's trees. But my point is, if all vegetation on Earth is gone, how is there any oxygen to breathe? You could rationalize some mechanical means of producing a breathable atmosphere, and this film's claim that the entire planet is a perfect 75 degrees no matter where you are would seem to imply that. But it's a stretch to say the least. But just as strange, there seems to be no logical reason for this fleet of greenhouse ships to be cruising around Saturn. There's no mention of colonies out this way, that would make sense then, but they are just cruising around the outer edges of the solar system for reasons. I assume there are colonies out there because these are cargo freighters taking cargo somewhere, but it's never made clear. When the ships are recalled, they are ordered to release their greenhouse domes and nuke them for reasons. Assuming you wouldn't want to bring them back to Earth for harvesting, why nuke them? Maybe a fuel versus mass thing. Regardless, just release them. What's the point of nuking them? And the dumbest thing of all is this expert botanist can't figure out why his plants are dying as he takes the ship farther and farther away from the sun. It occurs to him towards the end of the movie, I have been yelling at my TV screen for the past 45 minutes that you need the sun. He finally figures it out shortly before he offs himself. He caused their deterioration himself by stealing the ship and taking it beyond the sunlight's reach. Yet another cautionary tale about those self-appointed elites who presume to know more than the rest of us and don't. Still, you have to look at this film in historical terms. At the time this film was made, there were legitimate environmental issues that needed to be addressed. Any young folks who have been brainwashed into believing it's worse than it's ever been and the United States is to blame are being deliberately lied to. In 1970, American cities had terrible problems with constant smog, filthy rivers, and lakes. There are no environmental problems in the United States today that come anywhere close to what was happening 50 years ago. Companies were dumping filth into the rivers and pumping huge, noxious smokestacks into the air completely unchecked. Rampant deforestation without replanting was taking place. So at the time, these were issues that reasonable people were rightfully concerned about. And you know what? For the most part, we fixed them in the United States. You know where it hasn't been fixed? In leftist utopias such as the People's Republic of China, where, yes, it is worse than it's ever been. Dare I mention the People's Republic of San Francisco, where the lack of sanitation is approaching third world status? But this country, the United States, overall is far cleaner, far less polluted than it was in 1970. That is simply a fact. Thus, the environmental concerns of 1970 were legitimate and made for good science fiction fodder. But as I said, this movie isn't trying to get in your face so much as it's seeking to use the issue as a springboard to pull you into a creepy psychological thriller and character study. And on that level, it mostly succeeds. Meanwhile, on a visual level, it is an absolute work of art. On a surprisingly low budget, it's worth a look. Again, 4 out of 5 stars. And once again, 106 people found this helpful. But who cares what I think? From deep in the heart of Texas, I am Moonjumper. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, clang that notification bell. Don't forget to find me on Rumble, and I'll see y'all next time.
X minus 1. Tonight's story, The Man in the Moon.